I still don't fully understand how everything spiraled the way it did, but whenever I look back, I can trace the entire mess to one stupid moment of curiosity on a rainy Saturday afternoon. It wasn't supposed to be anything dramatic. I wasn't trying to make some huge statement or redefine my identity. I wasn't even thinking. I was just bored, alone at home, and wondering why my older sister always acted like her room contained some mystery treasure vault whenever she shut the door behind her. She guarded her closet like it hid government secrets instead of clothes. But that day, when she left in a rush for her shift at the cafe, she forgot to lock her bedroom door. I remember standing in the hallway, hearing the rain tapping the windows, and thinking I'd just take a quick look around. Maybe borrow her headphones, maybe look for the sketchbook she told me I'd never get to see. But the moment I stepped inside, everything felt like forbidden territory. Her room always smelled faintly of lavender lotion and whatever fruity spray she used. There were shoes lined neatly in rows that made me subconsciously straighten my own posture, as if the shoes were silently judging my slouched stance. And then her closet door, slightly ajar, seemed like an invitation I knew I shouldn't accept. I'm not proud of how long I stared at it, telling myself I was just curious. Eventually, curiosity won. Inside, her clothes were packed tight, arranged by color, like she was preparing for a magazine shoot. I touched one of her dresses, a soft pastel pink thing that looked too delicate for reality. I don't know what possessed me truly. Maybe it was the isolation of being stuck inside all week. Maybe it was the strange comfort of her room. Maybe it was just teenage boredom morphing into something impulsive. But I pulled that dress off the hanger. I told myself I'd just hold it. Just see what it felt like. But then, for some reason, I wondered how it would look. I'd never worn anything like it, obviously. And the curiosity tugged at me harder than the voice telling me this was stupid. I slipped it on over my head, struggling for a second as the fabric clung to me. When it finally settled on my shoulders, it fit better than I expected. Too well, actually. That realization sent a weird jolt through my stomach. I looked at myself in her mirror. I didn't look like me, but I also didn't look like someone completely different. I just looked softer, lighter, like another version of me, one I'd never met. I should have taken it off right then. That was the logical thing. But something about seeing myself like that made me freeze. The dress swayed slightly when I moved, and the unfamiliar weight of it made me tilt my head, analyzing every small detail of my reflection. I wasn't thinking of anything dramatic. I didn't have some epiphany. I was just strangely fascinated. Then I heard a sound. A door downstairs. My whole body turned to ice. She wasn't supposed to be home. She worked until 5. It was barely 2. I panicked so hard I couldn't breathe. I rushed to pull the dress off, but my foot got tangled and I stumbled forward, hitting the dresser with a loud thump that made the picture frames wobble. I winced, waiting, hoping she hadn't heard. But then her footsteps sounded on the stairs. I tried again, desperately yanking the dress upward, but the zipper snagged, and the more I pulled, the worse it got. I was trapped in pastel pink linen and pure terror. I heard her reach the top of the stairs, pause, and then walk straight toward her room. I didn't even have time to hide. The door swung open. She stared at me. I stared at her. If someone had photographed the moment, they could have sold it as a textbook definition of shock. My sister froze in the doorway, still holding her half-closed umbrella from the sudden downpour outside. Her voice came out flat, stunned, almost calm. Almost. What are you doing? I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My brain was scrambling for excuses, lies, anything, but all that came to mind were incoherent sounds that didn't form sentences. I probably resembled a fish flopping on dry land. She blinked slowly, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. I expected her to start yelling or laughing or calling Mom. Instead, her expression shifted to something I couldn't decipher. She walked in, quietly closed the door behind her, then leaned against it as if blocking any chance of escape. Give me one good explanation. Couldn't. I didn't have one. Everything I said sounded weak even in my own head. Curiosity. Boredom. Wrong place, wrong time. I ended up shaking my head, feeling heat bloom across my face. She sighed long and heavy, then set her umbrella aside. "This is unbelievable," she said, though her tone wasn't angry. More like she was processing something complicated. She walked slowly around me, folding her arms, studying me like I was a puzzle she was trying to solve. The dress still swayed slightly when I shifted in embarrassment. "You know," she finally said, "it's weird. 'Cause somehow, it suits you." That sentence hit me harder than any yelling would've. I didn't know what to say. I wanted the floor to swallow me. She smirked, not in a mean way, but in a way that told me she had just made a decision I wouldn't like. "You're not taking it off yet." My heart crashed into my ribs. "Wait, what? Why?" I asked, the panic raw in my voice. "Because you tried to sneak into my stuff," she said. "'Cause you went through my closet. And because you clearly weren't planning to stop anytime soon." I shook my head, stumbling for words, but she lifted a hand to stop me. "No excuses. If you want to wear my clothes so badly, then fine. But you're going to do it properly." I didn't understand what she meant until she opened one of her drawers and pulled out something that made my stomach plummet. "If you're going to dress like this," she said, "you're going to learn how to look the part. And you're not stopping until I say so." I felt a cold wave of dread. I wasn't sure what scared me more, that she caught me, or the look in her eyes telling me she had plans I was completely unprepared for. I froze, the words echoing in my head like a warning bell. "You're not stopping until I say so." I stared down at the dress again, feeling the soft fabric cling to my skin in a way that made every nerve in my body tighten. My sister wasn't joking. That look in her eyes, the calm but absolute authority, made me realize this wasn't just some scolding moment. She had plans for me, plans I hadn't agreed to, and yet somehow they were now my reality. I swallowed hard. My mind raced. I could run, I could scream, I could throw the dress across the room, but something about the way she stood there, calm but unyielding, made me pause. I couldn't move. I was trapped in more ways than one. She handed me a small brush. "Hair first," she said. "If you're going to wear my clothes, you have to do it right. Messy hair makes you look ridiculous. So brush it." I hesitated, looking at the brush in her hand, then back at her. I don't know how." Her eyebrows lifted slightly, amused. "Don't know. Really? You're my brother, aren't you? You brush your hair every day. I mean like this. Like girls do." My voice trailed off as I gestured at the dress, embarrassed. She sighed, and for a moment I saw something almost like pity. Then it vanished. "Fine. Watch me then. If you want to stay in my clothes, follow every step I tell you." "Got it." I nodded reluctantly. She grabbed my hair and began showing me, slowly, patiently, how to brush it, how to part it. My hands felt clumsy, too large, too stiff, and every motion seemed exaggerated and wrong. But she didn't laugh. She corrected gently, insisted on precision, and my chest tightened with a mixture of humiliation and something else I didn't want to name. By the time she was satisfied with my hair, I was exhausted, flushed, and oddly self-conscious. The reflection in the mirror wasn't entirely me. My hair was softer, tidier, my face framed differently, my posture slightly more deliberate. I looked at her, expecting mockery or impatience, but she just nodded. "Good," she said simply. "Now makeup. We're not going overboard. Just enough so you don't look like a scared kid wearing a dress. Basic stuff. Lip balm, light powder, maybe a little color on the cheeks. And yes, you're doing it yourself, I'm just guiding you." I felt a wave of panic again. I'd never touched makeup in my life. In my mind I pictured smears, disasters, embarrassment. She seemed to sense it because she leaned close and said, "I'll be with you every step. No mistakes you can't fix. Trust me. Trust me." The words hung in the air. I nodded, hands shaking slightly as I reached for the small items she set out. She guided my fingers, corrected angles, showed me how to hold the brush lightly, how to blend powder in tiny circles, how not to smudge the lip balm. Every step felt deliberate, foreign, and intimate in a way that made my heart race. When we finally paused, she stepped back. I looked at the mirror and barely recognized the person staring back. It was still me, but somehow different. Softer, more delicate. My features highlighted in ways I'd never considered. I touched my cheeks lightly, feeling a mixture of awe and unease. "Not bad," she said, and I flinched at the small compliment, unused to praise in this context. Then she added, "But you're not done yet. Clothes aren't just the dress. Shoes, accessories, posture. Every detail matters. You want to be believable, don't you?" I wanted nothing more than to disappear. And yet, there was a strange curiosity, a strange thrill, buried beneath my embarrassment and fear. What if I did this right? What if I could follow her instructions perfectly? My sister wasn't just teaching me. She was reshaping me, showing me a side of myself I had never seen. And the thought both terrified and intrigued me. The next hour was a blur of instructions, corrections, and repeated mistakes. She made me walk back and forth, adjust the hem of the dress, practice subtle gestures with my hands, and even coached me on how to tilt my head in the mirror so it looked natural. Every time I stumbled or fumbled, she corrected firmly but without cruelty. By the time we paused, the rain outside had stopped. Sunlight filtered through her window, illuminating the room, and I caught my reflection again. I looked different, but I also felt something strange inside, an awareness of how other people might perceive me, how small gestures and tiny details shaped the impression I left. My sister studied me closely, then finally nodded in approval. "You're learning," she said simply. "But this is just the beginning. You need to stay in the mindset too. Clothes aren't enough if your attitude doesn't match. Tomorrow we'll work on that." I wanted to argue, wanted to tell her I couldn't do this, that this was ridiculous. But the truth was, part of me wanted to see if I could. I didn't fully understand why, and the thought made me uneasy. My sister smiled knowingly, as if she read my conflicted emotions. "Sleep on it," she said. "But tomorrow you're staying in my clothes. No exceptions." I went to my room that night, stripped out of the dress with shaky hands, and collapsed on my bed. My heart was still racing, my mind buzzing with everything that had happened. I had never imagined that curiosity could turn into something so consuming. I stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the day, and realized with a sinking feeling that nothing would ever be the same. And deep down, a small part of me was excited. Morning came faster than I expected. I woke to sunlight slanting through my window, and immediately a knot of dread twisted in my stomach. Today was the day. The day my sister had promised I wouldn't escape the new rules she'd set. I tried to lie still, pretending maybe I could delay reality, but the memory of her standing in her doorway, calm, unyielding, had embedded itself too deeply to ignore. I dressed slowly, unsure of what to wear. My own clothes felt plain, insufficient somehow. And then the thought struck me. She would be expecting me in her clothes. I had no choice. The pastel dress from yesterday sat folded on my chair, soft and waiting. My hands trembled as I reached for it, and for the first time, I noticed how absurd the situation really was. I was my sister's younger brother, yet here I was, about to slip into her clothes again under her explicit instructions. I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or panic. I settled for panicking quietly in the bathroom as I pulled the dress over my head, my skin prickling under the unfamiliar fabric. The fit was better than yesterday, but the anxiety in my chest made me feel like the dress was a cage. I caught my reflection and froze. This wasn't just clothing. It was a transformation. Even my posture felt different, subtly forced into curves and angles I had never thought about. Then she appeared, quiet as ever, leaning against the doorway. "Good. You made it." Her voice wasn't mocking but firm. "Now, before you do anything else, we need to work on your presence." I blinked. "Presence? What do you mean?" "You're going to learn how to carry yourself, how to move, stand, sit. Clothes only do half the work. Attitude completes the picture." She gestured toward the small living room, which she had cleared of furniture. "Follow me." I obeyed reluctantly. She began with posture, standing behind me as she adjusted my shoulders, nudged my hips, and instructed me to lift my chin slightly. Every motion felt mechanical, awkward. I stumbled, fumbled, and wobbled, and she corrected me each time, her hands firm but careful. Sweat pricked my forehead, partly from the effort, partly from embarrassment. "Slow down," she said, almost gently. "You're too tense. Relax into it. Pretend the clothes aren't a costume. Pretend they're part of you." Part of me wanted to argue. Part of me wanted to escape. But another part, a quiet, insistent part, was curious. What would it feel like if I could do it right? Could I actually move, walk, and look like her or someone like her without it feeling fake? Hours passed. She made me practice walking with precision, turning my steps slightly inward, keeping my hands delicate at my sides, practicing small gestures with fingers that felt foreign. She critiqued every move, every tilt of my head, every glance at the mirror. I started to notice subtle changes, not just in my appearance, but in the way people might perceive me if they saw me like this. There was a strange power in being able to embody someone else's presence. Lunch came and went. I barely ate, too focused on maintaining the right posture, practicing subtle expressions, rehearsing the way she had taught me to tilt my head or smile lightly. My sister sat nearby, observing, correcting, and occasionally demonstrating. I didn't even notice the hours slipping by until the sky outside darkened with an afternoon storm. By evening I was exhausted, both physically and mentally. My body ached in new ways from moving differently, holding myself differently. Yet the mirror reflected someone transformed. Not fully, not permanently, but enough that I hardly recognized the nervous, unsure boy who had entered her room that morning. Then she stopped me, raising a hand. "Enough for today." I sagged in relief, almost collapsing onto the couch. Is it over?" Yes. "No," she said, a hint of amusement in her voice. "It's only just begun. But for today you've done enough. I want you to reflect. Pay attention to how it feels and how it changes you. Tomorrow we start makeup again. More advanced. And accessories. And yes, more clothes." I felt my chest tighten at the thought. Accessories. More clothes. How far did this go? I didn't even know who I was anymore when I looked in the mirror, the dress swaying slightly with my every motion. When I finally went to my room that night, I collapsed into bed, utterly exhausted. My sister's words replayed in my mind. "Pretend they're part of you." Part of me didn't want them to be part of me. Another part of me wondered, maybe it could be interesting. Maybe it could teach me something I didn't understand about myself. I slept fitfully, dreamt of mirrors that multiplied endlessly, each one showing slightly different versions of me in her clothes, each one more refined, more feminine, more confident. I woke up sweating, unsure whether I was terrified or excited. Probably both. And yet, deep down, a small voice whispered that things had shifted. I wasn't just in her clothes anymore. Something inside me had changed. Tomorrow would be worse, I knew. She would push further. And somehow, even as my stomach twisted with dread, I wanted to see how far I could go. The next morning, the air felt heavier, as if the storm from yesterday had settled inside my chest. I woke earlier than usual, heart thumping, my thoughts already racing about what today would bring. Yesterday's lessons had left me physically exhausted but strangely alert, hyper-aware of every small movement I made in bed. My fingers itched with nervous energy, and the memory of her instructions replayed in my mind. Posture, movement, presence. I swallowed, wondering if I was ready for what she had planned next. When I stepped into her room, she was already there, the pastel dress laid out neatly on her chair, shoes in perfect alignment at the foot of the bed. The sight should have made me panic again, but instead I felt a strange, guilty anticipation. She didn't speak immediately. She simply watched me enter, her expression calm but piercing. "Today," she said finally, "we refine. Makeup, accessories, hair, and clothing layers. If you're going to inhabit these clothes, you need to inhabit the details too. Tiny details make the difference between looking like a costume and looking natural." I nodded, gripping the dress in my hands, trying to steady my trembling fingers. Every day, The reality of being fully seen in her clothes pressed harder against me. I could still hide at home, sure, but she had decided that hiding was no longer an option. I had to face her, face myself, face the transformation. The morning was a meticulous, exhausting blur. She guided me through makeup again, this time with more precision. She showed me how to blend subtle tones for a natural look, how to enhance my eyes without overdoing it, how to contour softly to mimic the softness I saw in her reflection. Every motion felt foreign at first. My fingers fumbled, my eyes wandered, my arms tensed, but she was patient, correcting gently but firmly. Then came the accessories. Scarves, bracelets, hair clips, the tiniest hints that completed the outfit. She instructed me to hold my posture differently when wearing a necklace, to adjust my hands when carrying even a simple bag. At first, it felt absurd, ridiculous almost. But as I followed her instructions, I began to notice subtle changes. My movements, though awkward at first, started to flow more naturally. The reflection in the mirror was slowly aligning with what she had described. Confident, poised, deliberate. Around midday, she paused and had me practice sitting and standing repeatedly, observing how my body weight shifted, how my legs crossed, how my arms rested. Every subtle motion mattered. She clapped softly when I got something right, and gently corrected me when I faltered. I realized I was becoming self-conscious in a new way, not the embarrassed kind from before, but aware, analytical, focused. I was learning to inhabit a different version of myself. By the afternoon, my energy was draining, but she wasn't finished. She brought out another dress, a slightly more complicated outfit, layered and more structured. "You'll wear this for a short period," she said. "To see how well you can manage longer periods, more complicated clothing, and maintaining composure." I swallowed hard. Complicated clothing meant more constraints, more rules, more attention to every movement. I slipped it on, stiff at first, my body resisting the unfamiliar layers. But she guided me step by step. I learned to adjust, to move with intention, to correct myself without thinking too much. By the time we paused, I was exhausted, drenched in sweat, and strangely exhilarated. She studied me quietly. "You're improving faster than I expected," she admitted. "But it's not just appearance. You need to start thinking like someone in these clothes. How they feel, how they move, how they react. Clothes aren't just fabric. They're a mindset." I frowned. A mindset. How could fabric dictate mindset? And yet I felt it, a subtle shift in the way I carried myself, the way I breathed, the way I thought. The mirror didn't just reflect a body in clothes anymore. It reflected someone who could carry those clothes, who could exist within this carefully constructed identity. That night, after she left the room, I collapsed onto my bed, utterly drained. My mind raced, spinning with self-reflection. I had spent the day reshaping my body, my movements, even my thoughts, to fit an identity I had never asked to inhabit. And yet, the strange truth settled in me. I had glimpsed something I didn't understand about myself. Confidence, poise, attention to detail, even a flicker of pride. But with that flicker came fear. How far could this go? Would I ever escape this new rhythm she was teaching me? Could I go back to being just myself? Or was this experience changing me in ways I couldn't control? I stared at the ceiling, letting exhaustion and unease wash over me. I didn't have answers. I only knew one thing. Tomorrow would come, and with it, another layer of the challenge. Another step in her carefully orchestrated transformation. And deep down, I realized I was no longer simply resisting. I was learning. And that terrified me even more than yesterday had. The next morning, I woke with a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. I had barely slept, tangled in sheets, my mind replaying every lesson from the previous days. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how deeply this had begun to sink in. I wasn't just wearing her clothes anymore. I was thinking about how to move, how to sit, how to present myself before I even left my room. It was exhausting, but the thrill of curiosity refused to let me rest. When I stepped into her room, she was already waiting, sitting on her bed with a small, carefully folded pile of outfits beside her. Today, she said, her tone calm but commanding, you're going to live in them for most of the day. Not just practice, not just lessons. You will act as though this is your reality. My stomach dropped. Most of the day. That meant leaving the room, doing normal activities, and maintaining the persona she had crafted. I hesitated, unsure if I could manage the mental and physical strain, but she didn't allow hesitation. No excuses. Clothes, presence, behavior. All day. Are we clear? I nodded, my throat tight. She smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly, as if she knew how much this frightened me. I dressed carefully, each layer, each accessory applied with precision. The pastel dress from yesterday was replaced with something slightly more structured, a soft lavender dress that swayed differently when I moved. Shoes, socks, subtle jewelry, lightly styled hair. Each detail mattered. By the time I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized the person staring back. Not entirely unfamiliar, but undeniably changed. She guided me through basic activities first. Walking through the house, making small gestures, maintaining posture while speaking. Every motion felt deliberate, conscious. Every glance at the mirror revealed subtle differences in how I held myself, how I carried my weight, how my shoulders and hands moved. I began to notice the tiniest shifts in balance, the curve of my wrist, the way my head tilted. It was exhausting to think about, and yet I couldn't look away from the results. By mid-morning, she had me attempt more complex tasks. Making a small snack, carrying a cup of tea, even answering the phone. All while maintaining the posture, grace, and subtle confidence she had drilled into me. First, I stumbled constantly. My fingers trembled, the cup threatened to tip, my legs felt awkward. But she watched silently, only offering corrections when necessary. Slowly I began to adjust. The awareness of how every detail mattered grew sharper. I felt like I was learning an entirely new language, a language of gestures, posture, and controlled movement. When lunch came, she had me set the table. Not just set it, but do it with deliberate elegance. Plates, utensils, napkins, glasses. The placement of each item had to be precise, movements smooth and unhurried. I realized with a mixture of exhaustion and fascination that she was teaching me something deeper than clothes or posture. She was teaching me attention, mindfulness, self-control. By afternoon, fatigue had set in, but she wasn't finished. She handed me a slightly more intricate outfit, a layered ensemble that required careful adjustment, a vest, skirt, delicate scarf. I dreaded the challenge, but I followed her instructions meticulously. She had me practice sitting, standing, crossing my legs just so, adjusting the hem, the neckline, the flow of the skirt. It was exhausting, but with each correction I felt a strange thrill. Small victories, small successes. I began to see progress in the mirror, subtle but undeniable. As evening approached, she made me walk through the hallway, practicing expression and composure. She had me smile slightly, nod, move naturally while still maintaining the poise she demanded. Every step felt foreign, yet each step felt like progress. I was learning, adapting, becoming a version of myself that was disciplined, precise, and aware. Finally, she stopped me. "Enough for today," she said. "You've done well, but this isn't about perfection. It's about presence, understanding, and how you carry yourself. Tomorrow we'll push further. Longer durations, more complex scenarios. You're beginning to see how powerful this is." I sank onto my bed that night, utterly drained. My body ached, but more than that, my mind buzzed. I had spent the entire day thinking, moving, acting as someone I had never been. And yet, there was satisfaction hidden beneath the exhaustion. Small, strange, confusing satisfaction that I couldn't name. As I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I realized something unsettling. This wasn't just about clothes. I was beginning to inhabit a mindset, a presence, a controlled awareness of how I moved and looked in the world. And the idea that I might never fully return to the way I was before both terrified and intrigued me. For the first time, I understood that my sister wasn't just teaching me to dress differently. She was teaching me to see myself differently. And I wasn't sure if I was ready for how far this could go. The morning of the final day arrived quietly, with the kind of calm that felt deceptive. I woke early, muscles sore, mind buzzing with everything my sister had taught me. The exhaustion from the previous days lingered, but beneath it was a strange, simmering anticipation. I knew today would be different. I could feel it. When I stepped into her room, she was waiting as usual, but there was a shift in her demeanor. She wasn't just guiding anymore. She was observing with quiet intensity, as if measuring the results of every lesson, every correction, every moment of practice. The outfits for the day were more intricate. Layers, subtle patterns, delicate accessories, all designed not just to change appearance but to demand awareness. "You're ready," she said simply. "Today you stay in your outfit for the full day, in the house and outside if necessary. This is the ultimate test of presence, of control, and of how well you've internalized the lessons." My stomach tightened. I wanted to protest, to run, to hide, but I also felt something unfamiliar. An eagerness, a need to see if I could pull it off. I dressed slowly, meticulously, following every instruction she had drilled into me. Each layer, each fold, each detail became second nature as I adjusted to the rhythms she had imposed. By the time I looked in the mirror, I hardly recognized the person staring back. This version of me, poised, deliberate, aware, was both alien and intimately familiar. She had me begin with the basics, walking through the house, practicing gestures, expressions, posture. It was exhausting, yet I felt a new confidence with each step, a small thrill in knowing I could execute what had felt impossible days ago. Then came the more complex tasks. Cooking a small meal, carrying dishes, handling a phone call, all while maintaining composure, poise, and subtle grace. Mistakes came, of course, but I corrected them instinctively now, without as much conscious struggle. By midday, she had me practice longer periods of movement, more nuanced gestures, and even interactions as though someone else might be watching. At first, the awareness of being on display was terrifying, but gradually, I felt a quiet pride in how I moved, how I held myself, how I looked in the mirror. It was still unfamiliar, but I could feel myself inhabiting the persona she had carefully cultivated. After lunch, she guided me outside for a short walk around the yard. The sunlight caught the layers of fabric, and I felt the wind against the delicate folds of the dress. For the first time, I noticed how differently the world seemed when I carried myself this way. The movements, gestures, even my breathing had changed subtly. I wasn't just wearing the clothes, I was embodying them. When we returned inside, she sat me down. "Look at yourself," she said softly, "and tell me what you see." I hesitated, unsure how to put the experience into words. I see someone different," I finally admitted. "Someone more aware, more careful, more deliberate." She nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Exactly. That's the point. It wasn't about the clothes. It was about learning attention, control, presence. You've done more than just dress like me. You've learned to carry yourself, to inhabit a space consciously, to be aware of how small actions shape perception. That's a skill you can take anywhere." I felt a wave of relief and pride wash over me, tinged with exhaustion. For the first time, I understood what she had been trying to teach me. It wasn't about femininity or pretending to be someone else. It was about awareness, self-discipline, and seeing myself from a new perspective. That evening, after carefully removing the outfit, I looked in the mirror once more. I still saw myself, but also a reflection of the lessons I had learned. My posture was straighter, my movements more deliberate, my confidence subtly altered. And I realized with a quiet awe that the experience had changed me in ways I could carry forward, even when the dress and accessories were gone. I sat down on my bed, exhausted but satisfied. The anxiety that had gripped me when this started had shifted into something I couldn't fully name: awareness, discipline, and even a strange pride. I understood now that the clothes, the makeup, the gestures were tools, but the real transformation had been internal. I had learned to inhabit a presence, to pay attention, to carry myself deliberately, and to see myself with new eyes. My sister peeked in quietly, a small smile on her face. "You did well," she said. "Better than I expected." I smiled back, tired but genuine. "Thank you," I said softly. And in that moment, I realized that curiosity, embarrassment, fear, and even discomfort had led me to something unexpectedly valuable. Not just a transformation in appearance, but a transformation in awareness, confidence, and self-understanding. I was still me, but also something more. The journey wasn't over. Life wouldn't hand me such structured lessons again, but the awareness, presence, and discipline I had cultivated would stay with me forever. And for the first time, I felt both proud and capable in a way I hadn't known before, realizing that sometimes the most unexpected experiences can teach the deepest lessons.